The trade deadline came and went yesterday, and unless you've been living under a rock, you know the Twins didn't do anything. Frankly, that's unacceptable. So today, and right now, we're going to look at it. This is Locked On Twins Live.
You are Locked On Twins, your daily Minnesota Twins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello again, and welcome back to Locked On Twins. I'm your host, Brandon Warren. You can find me on Twitter, though I probably would not, at Brandon_WARNE. Thanks for making Locked On Twins your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. And every now and then, we will pop off with a live show, such as this one. Now, we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And two, if you are here watching us live, feel free to send in comments. The best ones will be used on the screen, answered in the show, that sort of thing. But again, we just love having you hang out, comments on YouTube, even on non-live videos or after these are posted. Come hang out. Again, we'll answer questions, ask questions, and just enjoy each other's company. Also, too, if you have questions you want answered on the show, if you are not on the show live, you can always send them on Twitter at Brandon_WARNE or at Locked On Twins. Hit the DMs and Locked On Twins post-game minutes. You'll see those as quickly as we can after pretty much every game too. So we'll have a stat in those that will be a stat you will not see anywhere else. Today's program is brought to you by Sleeper. Swing for the fences on Sleeper Picks, and you could win up to 100 times your money. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code Locked On. That's all one words, all caps, and you will get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 30 states. So head on out and check out Sleeper today and see if you're in one of those states. Twins Cardinals resume their series on Wednesday. It's a 6:45 first pitch. Joe Ryan against Dakota Hudson. Joe Ryan looking to bounce back from a 6.39 ERA in July. Of 76 pitchers who threw at least 25 innings in July, only one had a higher ERA. We'll do that as a trivia question, see if people know who it was. But if you want to catch every pitch of the Twins' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app, just search Twins. Now, we are here to discuss this Twins trade deadline. And to be candid, it was not a good one. I don't even know how to wrap my brain around the fact that I look at this roster and what I think it's capable of and what it has shown to be capable of. There's a pretty wide gap. And ordinarily, when you look at a team with that sort of gap, you're thinking, okay, if they're not going to give us their best, why spend any money or prospect capital or whatever to try to boost a team that's not going to get there? Which, I mean, I get that. I get that from a foundational standpoint. But I also look at the needs of this team, and they're simple. And they're not only simple, they're cheap. And so it wasn't as though we didn't see right-handed hitters or guys who can hit righties go, and we could approximate what that value would have meant from the Twins, right? You don't know what it would have taken to get Tommy Pham, but if you know it wasn't a huge prospect from Arizona, in your mind, you can mentally envision a scenario in which that trade would work from the Twins' vantage point. And sure, Pham went to Arizona. A bunch of other guys moved. And the rumor was that Teoscar Hernandez's asking price from the Mariners was ridiculous, which that to me feels like something that may have been fabricated. I'm not saying the team put it out there, but Teoscar's having a down year. He's making a ton of money, and he fits the exact role the Twins need as someone who can stand in the corner in the outfield and hit lefties. You're telling me they couldn't get something done there where it was going to have to be a player the Twins and their fans could never live without? That doesn't add up with me. Because Tommy Pham, Randall Grichuk, all having better seasons or better natural fits to this Twins team based on either the money they're making, the cost they cost in terms of acquired players. I don't know if they waited too long and hoped the Mariners would blink, and the Mariners didn't. And maybe at that point you're expecting Jerry Dipoto to do something rational because other GMs did. Maybe that's the mistake. I don't know. But to me, it was not going to be difficult for the Twins to find an upgrade in the corner outfield against left-handed pitching. And again, people want to say, well, Teoscar Hernandez strikes out a ton. They had interest in Ty France, who also strikes out a lot. Here's the issue. Yeah, you're bringing in someone who strikes out a lot, but chances are they're nudging Joey Gallo, off the roster. So you may be bringing in someone who strikes out a lot, but you're probably nudging off someone who strikes out even more. And again, too, in isolation, a guy like Teoscar Hernandez is not having a good season, low OPS plus, low on base percentage. But if you get him for a very specific role, that's all you need. Now, it's certainly possible the Mariners had misgivings about his perceived value and perceived role someplace else. Are the Mariners planning to play him against only lefties? I would doubt it based on the amount they paid him, the injuries they have in their outfield, and that sort of thing. So again, it's fair to say maybe the Mariners valued him more highly than the Twins did. But this is all stuff you find out in the month of July as you're trying to make these things happen. And there were still plenty of guys who were good against lefties who didn't move at all that should have moved. Nick Senzel should have been on the speed dial for the Twins. Can play a little outfield, play a little infield, has hit left-handed pitching, and at 28 still might have maybe a little upside in there. We've certainly seen players at 28 leave the Twins and do something else. If you want to believe in Yennier Cano as an upside play at age 29, that's your prerogative. But they could probably have some of that similar luck bringing in someone like Nick Senzel, who is not playing very often for the Reds and would have filled a role for this team. I'm absolutely stunned, just stunned that this deadline did not result in something. Now, we know this front office works under the cloak of invisibility. I don't know. To me, that's a little bit precious, but a lot of their moves don't get telegraphed through the media. You don't know for months that they're going to make a specific trade, or weeks for a free agent. Sometimes quite the opposite. With Josh Donaldson, they thought that they were out on him, or at least that was the perception in the big picture. So I gave them the benefit of the doubt. You hear all these people saying, no, they're not going to do anything. This is the Twins we're talking about. And it's like, this Twins front office is as active as any front office in this team or in this market has ever been. And they're signing guys for more money than they used to. They're making more trades than they used to. They're making higher stakes trades than they used to. So to me, that made sense. They're not going to do anything. Yeah, okay. And honestly, they ended up being right by goofing off and whatever. But to me, the fact that we didn't hear anything still didn't mean they weren't working on something. And I thought that what would trickle out was some outfield hitter that we didn't know was available or weren't that excited about, and a middle reliever who is probably no better than Dylan Floro would have come over in trades, whether together or separate. Together, Pham and Raley, to me, would have made sense. Separate, you could do Connor Joe, you could do Nick Senzel, you could do Brent Suter as the pitcher. There were a lot of guys who I thought would be on the move that weren't. And that's before, again, you consider the way these guys operate is to go get someone you're not even thinking about. You have no idea if they're even available. And at the same time, Dan Hayes tweets shortly after 5 p.m. on Tuesday, Twins deadline, done, nothing outside of the Dylan Floro trade a few days in advance. Unthinkable. Just absolutely inexcusable. It's showing, I think, a lack of awareness of where this team is, where this team can go, and what is going to get in their way. On this day a year ago, the Twins led 2-0 and 3-2 before the Tigers erupted for 3 runs in the 7th in a 5-3 win at Target Field. Griffin Jacks gave up all 3 runs as the Twins fell to 54 and 49 with the loss. Mark Contreras homered, but there are only 2 hitters on the active roster now who played in that game, Carlos Correa and Jorge Polanco. Also, too, the pitching lineup for this game is a real trip, so I'm just going to take you through it before we head to break. Chris Archer struck out 8, but will not surprise you that was in 4 1/3 innings with 77 pitches. That's about the Chris Archer special from last year, but he was followed by Giovanni Moran, Emilio Pagan, Griffin Jacks, Trevor McGill, Tyler Duffy, and Joe Smith. So it's kind of amazing to see how things can be so different just a year down the road. And so that was 1 year ago. Today we'll also do 10 years ago and 20 years before we get you out of the program. Now, let's talk about our friends over at Sleeper. If you want a chance to win more money but make fewer picks, this is the way to do it. Head to Sleeper, where you can win up to 100 times your money on just 2 or more fantasy baseball picks. So if you think that Byron Buxton is going to homer tonight off Dakota Hudson, boom, that's one of your picks. You know, if you think that the Twins are going to turn 3 double plays behind Joe Ryan, have at it. You can stack all of those things, get your picks right, and you can win big. They have dynamic payouts too, which says each player projection has a multiplier attached to it, as opposed to preset multipliers based on the number of legs in a contest. So with dynamic payouts, you get more stat categories to place contests on, and you can get a higher payout than other apps without making as many picks. So use the promo code LOCKEDON, and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. Make sure you see Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 30 states. So make sure you check out Sleeper today. All right. I'm still just ticked about this trade deadline, guys. Thanks for making us your first listen every day, though. If you're an everydayer, make sure to check back. We'll have a recap of the first couple games of the Cardinal series. Hopefully, what's a 2-0 start to the series. Not to be a downer, but the Monday game after the deadline, Tuesday game after the deadline was just kind of a snooze fest. Wasn't that exciting. We'll talk about it in the third segment in the 7th inning stretch, but I got to talk more about this deadline. I call it, and if you're looking at the screen, a dud line. Yeah, it's a dad joke. It's a bad joke. I've got 2 kids, so if you haven't heard me tell jokes yet, you know they're terrible. But it really was a dud. I give them an F. I had an F when the trading bell rang, what amounts to 22 hours ago when I'm recording this. F. And I thought, you know what? I can be open-minded on Dylan Floro, and I am. I think Dylan Floro is going to be okay. I think he will give them that depth that I was still thinking they should have been seeking with a Brent Suter, a Michael Fulmer. I mean, there's no shortage of guys like that floating in the ether at any given time. And maybe the Twins, Brent Honeywell got DFA'd by the Padres. Maybe they go get him. Sure, cool, whatever. But that's not to me like a guy you go out and try who's got at least some sort of track record. It's a guy who's got interesting numbers, big-time prospect. Same thing with their role opening up for a right-handed hitter with Trey Mancini getting DFA'd by the Cubs. But, really, is there a lot of value to be had there in the sense that he hasn't crushed lefties this year or particularly hit anyone all that well? I mean, again, maybe you catch lightning in a bottle. He was a big-time prospect for the Orioles, and when he runs into one, can do some good things. But to me, just assessing where you're at and where you're going and how you're trying to get there, to me, is why this deadline gets an F. here's my theory. So we've seen this front office wait to do whatever they're going to do in a trade deadline or an off season. You had the Lance Lynn, Logan Morrison off season where they signed those guys, Marwin Gonzalez. You've got the Jake Odorizzi trade was late. Part of me wonders if, as they waited on this deadline, did they observe the Guardians basically washing their hands of it and say, well, if that's what they're going to do, our primary competition is basically saying, see ya, deuces. We're going to punch out and start again tomorrow, which is 2024. Did they wait long enough to where they see that and then they're like, all right, well, then there's definitely no need to overextend and make a trade for a right-handed hitter who may or may not help at all, which again is the nature of the trade deadline in the first place. If the Rays thought Nelson Cruz wasn't going to make a huge difference for them down the stretch a couple years ago, they don't trade Joe Ryan to the Twins. That's the danger of the small sample size after the deadline with relievers and whatever is it's not unreasonable for those players to go on their first 45, 50 game, like their toughest stretch of the season, changing teams this late in the season, the exhaustion that comes with playing this late in the season. So yeah, there's going to be risk inherently attached to whenever you acquire anybody. You can look at this team as flawed and say, wow, I don't know if bringing in more flawed players is going to get us where we're wanting to go. Every player the Twins would have wanted would have been flawed. Middle relievers by definition are flawed because they have something preventing them from being a starter. A guy like Teoscar Hernandez is flawed because he makes a ton of money, only hits lefties, and isn't a good defender. But in the right situation, he can be the right fit. To me, the Twins are that fit when you either have Michael A. Taylor or, knock on wood, Byron Buxton eventually covering center field. Gives you a little more leeway in the corners. If you have Kepler and right, then you've got pretty much center and right of center in good shape. You know, when you're expecting Teoscar to be your number 2 or 3 best hitter on the team, that's an issue. But if he comes to Minnesota and is, you know, basically if you swap him out for Joey Gallo and you give Gallo's at bats against righties to Matt Wallner, you have in effect created a Matt Wallner and Teoscar Hernandez platoon that is going to be, in the aggregate, just an incredible amount of production. Teams do this. Good teams do this all the time. It's the reason why the Rays have guys who only face righties and put up good numbers. The Red Sox would do it with guys like Steve Pearce. So to me, getting rid of Gallo while opening up plate appearances for Wallner, while mixing and matching him with Teoscar makes so much sense. It makes all the sense in the world. And for whatever reason, that just did not trip their trigger. And again, if you're just catching up with us, I heard, I don't know where it even came from, that they were interested in Royce Lewis for Teoscar. And I don't even give that credence because it's so preposterous. Like, no chance. If a guy like Mark Canha is on the move for virtually nothing at the money he makes, Teoscar should not have been getting that much more in terms of value. And so if you had called a bluff on the Mariners GM, he'd be sitting like he is now with players on his hands and no trades getting done. To me, it makes no sense that the Twins could not find any right-handed hitting and any relief pitching at even the barest of minimum price points. Michael Fulmer last year was Sawyer Gipson-Long. I promise you, not that many people have missed Sawyer Gipson-Long in this farm system, right? So why couldn't they have made the equivalent trade this year? Instead, they trade ceiling in Jorge Lopez for floor in Dylan Floro. Perfectly defensible move, but it can't sit in isolation. It cannot sit by itself. It is a fireable offense to not have made the most basic improvements to this roster. It was not going to be difficult. It was not going to be expensive. And it would not have been putting your neck on the line so much that you'd be risking further outcry. Like this farm system, like this fan base could have more outcry than there has been anyway, right? So to me, I keep coming back to the fact that, yeah, this is a flawed team. They were flawed last year and made huge moves, and it didn't work. But they're flawed with their arrow pointing in the right direction, not the case last year, and they chose to just leave it be. I cannot wrap my head around it. I know this roster is going to get tricky when guys get healthy, but we've been waiting all season for this roster to get healthy, and it has not gotten healthy. It will not get healthy. It's not going to happen. There are enough guys on the injured list that can be moved around to the 60 to have accommodated adding a couple of just veteran guys for your clubhouse who could have given you a better look when you face lefties coming up here, when you have late in the game and you need to get somebody out and you're not wanting to go to Giovanni Moran. Again, like this is all so unavoidable. And that's before you consider the Dallas Keuchel situation. Let's talk about Dallas Keuchel when we come back here, because to me, it's also interesting that he opted out and the Twins are on the clock to figure out what they should do with him next. On this day 10 years ago, the Twins walked off the Astros at Target Field in 13 innings, 4-3. Now, you are going to find this very curious, but the winning pitcher that day was Ryan Presley, and the losing pitcher was Dallas Keuchel. So, little Twins Astros immaculate grid crossover appeal here. But the win moved the Twins to 46-60 on the season. Still, though, somehow miles better than the Astros, who were 36-72. Jason Castro and Robbie Grossman, future Twins, both picked up hits for the Twins. And you will not believe the sequence of events from the 13th inning. Doug Bernier opened the inning by grounding out to first. Cleet Thomas walked Kevin Correa, not Carlos Correa. Nope. Not even in the big leagues yet. Kevin Correa bunts Thomas to second, and Brian Dozier singled Thomas home for the walk-off winner. Doesn't get much worse than Twins Astros in 2013. Now we're coming into the home stretch. Twins Cardinals playing on Wednesday, 6:45 p.m. It's Joe Ryan looking to shake off what was a pretty brutal July. If you were listening earlier, we talked about how he was tied for the second highest ERA in all of baseball among pitchers with at least 25 innings pitched in July. The number one highest ERA was Marcus Stroman at 9.11. So if you had Marcus Stroman as your guess to the initial little question that I posed at the top of the show, you were right. I believe Tony Gonsolin had Gonsolin. I screw this name up all the time, so I'll probably get some crap for it. He was also tied with Ryan. But yeah, Marcus Stroman, who, name was up in trade rumors. Cubs have picked it up of late. He ended up staying put, but had a pretty brutal month. Anyway, if you want to catch every pitch of the Twins hometown broadcast, SiriusXM, just go to the SXM app. Sorry, easy for me to say, and search Twins. So, Dallas Keuchel exercises his opt-out. Twins have 48 hours to decide whether to put him on the 40-man roster or let him walk. And, a lot of people are talking about, what's this all about? Why bring him along if you're not going to put him on the roster? Part of me, now that they've got time to still kind of decide what they're going to do, I feel like there's maybe a chance their inactivity at the deadline suggests they're willing to give him a look. Again, I think it should be as a bulk guy. I think it should be as someone who sandwiches between like a Balazovic and a Griffin Jacks. If you're going to try and mess with someone's timing while having Keuchel not face the heart of the order 3 times, something I would try. But with that said, the number of people caping for trading Sonny Gray and bringing up Keuchel to me was just astronomically mind-blowing. Made no sense at all to me. And I'm not opposed to Keuchel getting a chance. He went to Driveline. He's doing different things. He's still throwing 87, and people are using that as a strike against him. That's what he did when he was good, too. Like, he's not any more likely to be bad because of his velocity than he is just because he might do the same things he did last year and got his butt kicked. But is he worth a look? Sure. If you want to see him instead of Giovanni Moran late in games, I mean, whatever. I'll take the lefty throwing 94 over the guy throwing 87. But if you want to give him a look, I'm not opposed to that. My curiosity has been stoked by the concept of Keuchel signing with the Twins, pitching well at AAA, and opting out. I'm interested to see what he can provide. But I'm not swapping out a top 1, 2, 3, wherever starter, Sonny Gray, to see what he's got. 1, you don't have to. 2, it would be a terrible decision. Got a couple commenters wanting to know why the Guardians sold. Derek Weber is one of them. Bad Meme Guy is the other. So Derek Weber says, do you think they gave up knowing the Twins will take the division? And Bad Meme Guy says, why did the Guardians sell? I would honestly, I would say that the Guardians got an offer they felt like they couldn't refuse on Savali. Manzardo has incredible measurables. He's very close to MLB ready first base prospect. To me, what's tough is, Savali's a good starter. Peripherals are not the best, but he's a good big league starter. He's second on that rotation in Fangraphs WAR. And, are you certain Manzardo is going to be the next, somewhere between Rizzo and Freeman? Because, first base prospects can be a dime a dozen. It's so hard to defensively and offensively, or enough of one or the other, fulfill what is expected of them as prospects to be a viable, good value. So, is this like the Twins trading Bailey Ober for him? Probably no, not quite. And I know the Guardians seem to create arms like this out of thin air, but I think it's easier to do when they're not being relied upon. Like when you have the pipeline of Masterson and Kluber and all these guys that have come through, Bieber, and that you're not asking these young kids to be 1s and 2s. You're letting them be 3, 4s, and 5s and kind of grow into that. Now, does that mean I don't think Tristan McKenzie could be a 1 or a 2? No, that's not it at all. But I think bringing them on as a group is going to be a tougher sell than I think fans and people who are kind of assessing where the Guardians are at right now are giving credit for. So I personally was not sure about the trade, but I don't think Guardians sold to hand over the division to the Twins because they see the playoff odds and are like, well, this is never going to happen. It was more they got a value that they liked and they went with it. They didn't trade down. They didn't trade anything that was nailed down. Josh Bell being flipped makes sense because that way Manzardo has a spot next year when Bell most likely opts in. But, beyond that, I see what the Guardians did and why they did it, but it still feels like, I don't know. They're close enough to first place that it would have been really difficult for me to make those deals. Jake Jensen says, did the front office not do anything strictly given the cost of the offseason additions and the state of other teams in the division? I don't know if we'll ever know. I haven't read anything from the people who are on the ground or, the reporters, because I don't want to have it sully what I think before I, record and share it with all of you. I want to have my opinion before I see what other people have to say on what happened. But I think it came down to trusting the talent this team has to get it where it's going. And that's where I was at to start the year. I still believe in this 40-man roster of talent. But you had the opportunity to supplement it very cheaply on the margins and didn't. Again, I know Royce Lewis is coming back. Nick Gordon's coming back, depending on where he fits. Just though, to me, it does not make sense not to just make small little additions. You are bottom 5 in weighted runs created plus against lefties. That's the easiest place to improve your offense at this time of year. If you can convince yourself that you're back into your bullpen with Jax and Thielbar and Duran, and hopefully at some point Stewart, which Stewart coming up with a setback throwing wise just before the deadline was like perfect. Like you didn't see that coming. They talked about the throwing beforehand. They knew they may be up against it, and they still did not get a reliever. Even if you think you have enough horses on the back end of this bullpen, and I think you can squint and maybe feel that way, you still needed help on the front end. You still need to get to the point where you're not only winning this division and hopefully wrapping it up sometime in mid-September to get right health-wise, get pitchers lined up and that sort of thing. But you're going to need every last bit of depth to get you through October, and the Twins just said, meh, we don't need it. I don't get it. It makes no sense. Makes no sense at all. Ryan Linderholm gives us a nice little bit to walk off with. I give them an F. They didn't even show up to school for the test. Well, it feels like they did the test prep, like the ACT, SAT prep that you do, but they didn't take the test. They're like, I'll prep for the test, trade Jorge Lopez for Dylan Floro, but they didn't take the test. And they still might cruise into college playoffs at the end of the year. And who knows what happens there. I fully endorse the concept that anything can happen at the end of the year. But the bar to leap for these acquisitions. And again, we had people talking about Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado, Cody Bellinger, David Bednar, Josh Hader. And that's when I made the episode that said, hey, calm down. They're not gonna cook like that. They're not gonna make a 4-course meal. They might grill you a really nice steak. If they grill you a really nice steak, or even a few burgers, like Floro and a right-handed hitter and another reliever would have been. But instead, they got the grill all heated up and then walked away. Unacceptable. It may work. It may come back to work. And I always say that the things I don't know are what make me not want to just come down and absolutely blast this front office. Maybe they really do fear a 40-man crunch with guys coming back, that they don't want to lose somebody otherwise important after the deadline. I don't know. There's probably a ton of unsaid reasons that I, as an idiot, haven't figured out. But to me, what it would have cost for what this team would have needed for none of that to happen, inexcusable. If they don't make the playoffs, everyone needs to go. Everyone needs to go. So now it's time. On this day 20 years ago, Twins lost 9-2 to the Tigers to fall to 54-55 on the season. The Tigers were just 29-79 and on the way to an incredible, in a negative sense, 43-119 season. Rick Reed, who had just celebrated his first anniversary as a Twin, gave up 4 runs in 7 innings, and then in the 8th, J.C. Romero and Juan Rincon allowed 5 more. Other than that, former Twins infielder Warren Morris had a hit for the Tigers. Future Twins outfielder Craig Monroe as well with a homer and a double. Yeah, but from what we know from 2003, the Twins took off right after this, and the Tigers, meanwhile, still had 40 more losses and only 14 more wins the rest of the way. Anyway, that's it. That's a wrap. Thanks for hanging out for this Wednesday edition of Locked On Twins. We're working on a few guests. Trevor Hildenberger was up earlier this week. We're working on Pat Light. We're working on Jock Jones. We're working on a few others. If you have ideas for who you want to be on the show, drop us a line. Otherwise, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Locked On Twins, at Brandon_Warren. Subscribe, like, give us a 5-star rating on whatever platform you are listening or watching. Hang out in the comments section. But otherwise, this is Brandon Warren signing off and saying, don't forget to stop by tomorrow.